So today, day 3 is here. So thank you so much for sticking with us. We have over 1,300 people signed up for this summit, which is just totally exciting. And I'm having so much fun, like getting to know you guys. If I haven't commented on your comments and stuff, like I am getting there. So remember that this is like super important for you and your family, and we are so happy that you are here. You can totally keep up with the lives and or the replays, and make sure that you're commenting on the replay posts with your takeaways, and get into action. And of course, earning those prize entries as well. So seriously, I consider myself like a parenting specialist, a hanging with my kids specialist, and like this is my passion. And I am also an elementary teacher, which you guys know, but I totally feel refreshed, reminded, inspired, and a better parent already just from hearing from all these amazing speakers in the summit. So let these amazing speakers continue to speak to you, and do not let this opportunity pass you by, because the replays will not be here forever. So as I am getting Dr. Laura Markham up here on the screen, can you all give her a shout out that she is here with us today? Like, this is just so exciting. So give her a warm welcome in the chat. All right, so there we go. We've got her in. We are getting her unmuted and her video on. Hi!
Hi.
Oh my goodness, this is so exciting to have you with us. Oh, so I am going to read your bio if you don't mind. All right, so here we go. Dr. Laura Markham is the author of Peaceful Parenting, Happy Kids, which is Stop Yelling and Start Connecting. I have your books, very exciting. Also, Peaceful Parent, Happy Siblings, How to Stop the Fighting and Raise Friends for Life. And now her latest book, The Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids Workbook, Using Mindfulness and Connecting to Raise Resilient, Joyful Children and Rediscover Your Love of Parenting. Dr. Laura Markham earned her PhD in clinical psychology at Columbia University and has worked as a parenting coach with countless families across the world. Over 1,500,000 moms and dads enjoy Dr. Laura's free weekly coaching posts via email. You can sign up on any page of her website, which is ahaparenting.com. I'll say that again, ahaparenting.com. And that is AHA as in AHA, parenting, which serves as aha moments for parents of babies through teens. Dr. Laura's aspiration is to change the world one child at a time by supporting parents. The proud mother of 2 thriving young adults who were raised with her peaceful parenting approach. She lives with her husband in New York. So Dr. Laura is actually doing an interview with us. So if you have questions for her, which is really exciting, because I know a bunch of you have been asking questions, and you have like burning questions that you really want to ask about your specific toddler. So if you can drop the questions in the question and answer feature, that would help me to kind of feed the questions easily. And so I'm actually going to start with a couple questions, if you don't mind, unless you want to talk to us a little bit first.
No, I'm happy to start with questions if you want. I mean, I could tell you, maybe I should just say the basics of how I would approach anything in parenting, and we can go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. All right. So the basics of how I would approach anything in parenting is I would start with connection, because until we have a connection with someone, we don't have influence with them. So if we want our toddler to do what we say, it's all about the relationship. parenting isn't a set of strategies, right? I mean, marriage isn't a set of strategies. It's a relationship. Parenting is the same thing. So 90% of parenting is connection, because kids can't hear our direction or our correction until they feel connected. That's the first thing. Second thing is, until we can calm ourselves down, we can't actually connect. So when our toddler does something that drives us crazy, it's understandable. It happens a lot, right? Toddlers can drive anyone crazy. We have to start by regulating ourselves. And that does two things. First of all, it models for the child how to handle big feelings. And they learn from our modeling more than anything else. The second thing it does is it creates more safety in the situation. It helps the toddler settle down and regulate, because they don't feel they're not in fight or flight anymore. If we're not in fight or flight, right? They can calm down now. So they're more willing to then connect with us and accept our direction. So that's the second thing. So we've got connection and we've got self-regulation for the parent. And the final thing in parenting that's so important is coaching the child to be their best self. Instead of trying to control the child with threats and punishment or even bribes, we're curious about, well, why is the child doing this? What is going on with the child? And is there some need they have? I mean, maybe they need a nap. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they need some more attention from us. We've been on our phone nonstop. Whatever it is, if they're acting out, there's a reason for it. So instead of threatening and punishing, we can actually figure out why they're doing it. And we can meet that need, and then they're not acting out. So that's a shorthand way of saying what coaching is. Coaching is also controlling the environment. Maria Montessori famously said, don't try to control the child. Control the environment so the child can thrive. So coaching is all about controlling the environment, which includes us, what we're doing, right? So the child can thrive, rather than trying to control the child, because we can't really ever control anybody else, as every parent of a toddler already knows. So that's my approach. I call it peaceful parenting because the emphasis is on the peace within us, right? The emphasis is on how we show up rather than trying to get our child to do something.
Absolutely. And you're speaking to what we've been hearing in the summit. And like, this is just like, I mean, it's the best way to parent, is making sure that you're in a good place and they're in a good place, and you've got that peaceful parenting rather than yelling and being angry and being upset, like it's so rewarding if parents can get to that peaceful place. So you already kind of talked a little bit about it, but can you tell us like a little bit more about the needs of the child? You already kind of talked about it a little bit.
Well, so a toddler's needs, we're focusing on toddlers today, right? So a toddler needs connection. They developmentally need us to be there for them, or they don't feel secure in the world. And so if our attention is elsewhere, you know how it is, they'll be perfectly happy, and then we get on the phone to return a phone call, or even we pull out our phone to check something, and the next thing we know, they're misbehaving. So they no longer feel safe when our attention is diverted. So they don't need our attention 24/7, but they do need us to reassure them that we're still available should they need us, right? And when they have that strong, and I guess, I'm just going to go ahead and use the word secure attachment. Secure attachment just means it doesn't mean you wear your baby. It doesn't mean you nourished your baby. It doesn't mean you sleep with your baby. Secure attachment, those are all ways that you might develop a more secure attachment, but you don't need them to develop a secure attachment. A secure attachment is your child's trust in you. They trust that you will respond to their needs and that you will accept whatever feelings they have. If they get angry, you can handle it, right? If they're sad and needy and whiny and clingy, you can handle it. You're going to respond to them. That's secure attachment. So that's the number one need of babies. Now, by the time they're toddlers, it's still the foundational need. They need it so they can go on to do the next thing. And the next thing is they need to explore. They need to tear your house apart, right? They need to learn how the world works. right? And they don't have much prefrontal cortex yet. So they will, flush everything they can find down the toilet if they get a chance to do that. They just don't have any idea that that's a problem for us, right? They will run in the road. They will, take a knife and see what they can do with it. And so obviously we have to protect toddlers from themselves. And we have to protect our home from them. One of the best things to do with toddlers is get them out of the house when possible so that they can tear other things apart instead of our house, right? But so their need is to explore and to experiment. And also that means to push the limits. Oh, well, mommy said no yesterday. Does she still mean no today? Or she said no climbing on the TV, but what about the bookcase, right? So toddlers' job is to test the limits, because otherwise, how do they know where the limits are and how consistent they are? So our job is to keep a sense of humor and to set those limits over and over again, and to be really clear about the things that are firm limits, because sooner or later, when the toddler pushes and it's a wall there and it doesn't move, they'll stop experimenting on that wall and they'll go find something else to push against, right? So if our limit is firm, like that wall, then they will not push on it. But if we're constantly changing where the limit is, you can expect your toddler to say, oh, well, you've trained me to keep pushing here to see where the limit is.
Yes, absolutely. So you kind of already talked about some of the other things I was going to say, like, what do you do if your toddler is tantruming? Because we know that happens.
Well, so let's talk about tantrums specifically. Tantrums are nature's way of helping your toddler cope when they're overwhelmed. So we get overwhelmed. Every mother of a toddler has been overwhelmed, we know. And what happens when we feel overwhelmed? We get whiny, we get weepy, we just want somebody to take care of us. We're just like, oh, I cannot cope with this. You want to throw up your hands. You might want to throw yourself on the floor and scream, but usually you don't do that as an adult, right? But we've all felt overwhelmed, right? And what do we do with it? We're not very can-do at those moments, even if we're can-do kinds of people other times, right? So toddlers get overwhelmed much, much more often. And there's a reason for that. They don't have, as I just said, their brain is not in the same place as ours. Their prefrontal cortex is still developing. They're still trying to make sense out of the world. The world is so overwhelming. There's so much going on. They're powerless. They can't even open your front door. They can't get themselves a snack. They can't make it stop raining when they want to. And they don't know there's a difference in those things. And if you won't stop the rain, why won't you, right? They don't know that you can't. They just don't have perspective on things, right? And they feel powerless. I was in an elevator not so long ago with a toddler and about 8 adults, and the toddler's on the floor holding on to mom's hand and looking up. And I thought, this is the way all human beings start out. They're all, from the beginning, they're all little and powerless, and they feel like everybody's bigger than them and everybody else is in charge, and they're not in charge, and they're being jerked around. So naturally, toddlers are going to fall apart and be overwhelmed. So what happens when they get overwhelmed? Well, they're not going to have a reasonable discussion. They don't have a prefrontal cortex. It's still under construction, right? So what do? They throw themselves on the ground and they scream, right? They howl. And sometimes you don't know what's going to set it off. Sometimes it's just one more thing and they couldn't handle it. Sometimes you see it building, and that's why toddlers need a routine. So they get fed on a regular basis. They get enough sleep. And that's why they need parents who stay calm, because when you're more calm, your child is more able to hold it together at those moments when life feels overwhelming. They feel like they have backup. You're the backup. So it's like, well, life really isn't very good right now, but mom might be able to help me with this. They don't actually articulate that, but that's what goes on. And they turn to you and they're like, mom, and if you open your arms and say, oh, sweetheart, you didn't want to go home from the playground, or you really wish you could have a cookie, or this isn't what you wanted to have happen, or you really don't want to get in your car seat. You acknowledge that and no, they can't have everything they want. That's too bad. They can't. but they're getting something better. They're getting a mom or dad who understands them and helps them no matter what, even when you have to say no to that cookie, or yes, you have to get in your car seat. Even when you set a limit, you understand. Now, sometimes they will still cry. They'll still be like, no, and they hurl themselves on the ground and they sob, and that's fine. It's not disrespect for you. That's like the furthest thing from their mind. They're just overwhelmed, right? If you cried when something, went wrong for you, your husband doesn't see that as disrespect from you towards him. No, you're just overwhelmed, right? There's no disrespect. It's just your toddler's overwhelmed. And so even if they're yelling, no, 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 they're not trying to disrespect you. They're expressing their dismay that life is so bad for them right this moment. And you know what's great? If you just say, oh, I know it's so hard. I'm right here with a hug when you're ready, because they won't let you touch them often at that moment, and that's fine. They're too angry. Once they cry, you say, I'm right here with a hug when you're ready. They're going to be crawling into your arms, looking for that hug. You give them the hug and you say, I know it's so hard to leave the playground, and now it's time to go home. And then you find a palatable way to put them in their car seat. Do you want to go in upside down like this, you might say? And if you think they're still, I'm serious, like pick them up by their feet. But if you think they're still too fragile emotionally to handle that kind of fun making, then you just say, do you want to listen to this song on our way home or that song on our way home? And they go, the song about the dolphins. And you say, okay. And you put them in their car seat and say, we can start singing it now, and I'll turn it on in just a minute, right? And then they're in the car seat and they're going home. And what's their takeaway? When mom says it's time to leave the playground, she means it. There's nothing I can do about that. I just have to do it. But at least she understands. At least someone loves me even when life seems to be bad for me, right? And what happens is, your toddler learns that those emotions are not bad. They're not wrong. They're just not necessary. So instead of having to stuff the emotions, which means your toddler will become very volatile, more likely to tantrum in the future, right? Because when you stuff an emotion, it's not under conscious control. It'll burst out later. So instead of asking your child to, now, don't you cry now, to stuff the emotions, you're acknowledging, yeah, it's okay to have them. And that's the foundation of emotional intelligence, so that you'll have a 3 or 4-year-old who can actually express their needs without falling apart on you.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take the first question. It says, I have a 4-year-old about to be tested for autism. Do you have an experience, advice, etc., on how to approach his disobedience and siblings fighting peacefully, respecting who he is and the struggles he is not in control of yet, not throwing away all discipline? This is from Kathy. Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, so I love that Kathy, this mom, is understanding that her 4-year-old has some special issues, and therefore she has to make some allowances, right? That there's some things that he's not able to control himself the way another 4-year-old might be able to do. So this 4-year-old, I'm going to presume, based on what she said, might be a little rigid, might have a hard time being flexible, might have a hard time articulating what he wants or needs with his sibling, for instance, and therefore gets into some sort of a struggle with his siblings. And it sounds like Kathy appreciates that, like she understands it, and she's trying to make those allowances. And yet at the same time, she, in sibling struggles, you can't have the other child being mistreated or treated unfairly. And also, you don't want to throw away all discipline. There's some things, he can't just hit his parents when he's unhappy, for instance, the way he might want to. So what I would say, Kathy, is you've already got the foundation here of understanding your son, and that's so fabulous. And the best thing to do when you set limits with him is to acknowledge his perspective. So here's how you set limits. It's a 3-part process. This is true not just for your son, Kathy, but for all children, all the time, no matter what limit you're setting. And we could develop limit setting and talk about it for hours, but the most simple approach is this. 1, you empathize with what the child wants or needs, or what they're expressing, their perspective. 2, you set the limit. And 3, you redirect them or tell them what they can do, right? Empathize, set the limit, redirect. So in this case, let's say the child is disobeying. She mentioned disobedience. So mom says, time to put your shoes on. We're going to do something. And he says, no, I'm busy playing with my trains. Okay, he's disobeying her. So she goes over to him. And when you set a limit, sometimes kids will fight you on the limit. She goes over to him and she gets in his face in a friendly way to make it clear that she's not going to back down on her limit. This is a real limit. And she says to him, hey, sweetheart, and she uses his name. And she says, you're having such a great time playing with your trains, aren't you? Sounds like you really don't want to go with me to the store. She's just acknowledged his perspective, right? Then she sets the limit. And we have to go to the store. I need to take you and your sibling with me because there's no other grown-up here. And we have to get some food for dinner. And she's not going to imply that they're all going to starve, but she can say, we're making that yummy whatever that he loves, the pasta you love. But we have to get the things at the store. So we do have to go. So she set a clear limit. We do have to go. She's even explained why, which you don't have to do, but in this case she has. And she's tried to entice him with the yummy pasta. And now she needs to tell him what he can do, right? She needs to redirect his desire to stay there and play with the trains instead of going. So now she needs to say, I know you want to stay and play with your trains. You can keep playing with them when we come back, but would you like to bring one of the engines with us to the store? So she's telling him what he can do. He can play later. He can bring an engine with him to make the transition easier. Now, that doesn't mean he'll go for it. He might hurl himself down to the ground and howl. He might. 2-year-olds are famous for that, and even a 4-year-old will do it sometimes, especially a kid who's less neurotypical, which it sounds like this young man is, right? So he might throw himself down on the floor and howl. And she can say, I know, it's so hard to stop. You were having such a great time playing. When you love what you're doing, it's hard to stop and do something else, right? And then she can say, I understand. And you can definitely play later. And here's an example of one thing that could help. Let's write this down, this promise. And she takes a piece of paper. I used to keep a piece of paper taped to the wall near our front door. And I would, even way before my daughter could write or read, she was 4 years old, and I would write on it, Mommy promises that when we get home, Alice can play with her dollhouse, or whatever needed to be said. So the mom would write this down, and she would sign it. And she might ask her son to sign it, saying, you sign too, you're going to play with your train when we get home. Now, why would you do this? Because it takes the child out of their upset, right? The emotional part of the brain, and it shifts them into the logical reasoning part of the brain, right? That's all about the logic and the sequencing of the events and the words being used, and even writing, because writing is magic for young children. Even though they can't read it, it's magic to them. And you always start a thing with your kids that says, let's make a promise. Let's shake on it. We always keep our promises, right? Okay. As soon as we get home, you get to play with your trains again, right? And we're going to put this up by the front door. And now you're at the front door. You're halfway out of the house, right? You're at the front door where his shoes are. You've got this taped up. Now you say, do you want to put your shoes on in here? Or put them next to you in the car, and then we'll put them on before we get out of the car on the other end. And he's like, later. So now what's happened? Again, he's using the reasoning part of his brain, which is overriding the emotional part. He's now intrigued with the idea, oh, mom's sort of bending the rules a little bit on my shoes. She's being flexible. I appreciate that. I could be flexible. And it's sort of exciting to get in the car with no shoes. She says, okay, I'll have to fly you to the car to do that, right? But we'll put on the shoes before we get out of the car on the other end, right? Now he's all enrolled. End of discussion, right? He's having a good time with her now. How did she accomplish that magic feat? Started with empathy. You really don't want to stop playing with your trains. And maybe she had to sit there for 10 minutes while he howled. It might be that that's the case, but she didn't back down from her limit. I know it's so hard for you. We're still going to the store, right? And she made it as palatable as possible to him. So that's an example of how you would deal with the disobedience. Sibling stuff is a whole other thing, which we certainly could talk about. But I would just say, don't be unfair to the sibling. Coach the sibling to stand up to your 4-year-old. And maybe the sibling is only one, but if the sibling can articulate their needs, they can say to the 4-year-old, it's my turn now, or anything else that they need to say. And you want to coach, always coach one of your children to stand up to the other one, and then you back that child up. Say, yes, the house rule is that, when, is that you don't touch someone's body without permission. So when the sibling says, stop pushing me, you say, I hear your brother asking you to stop pushing him, honey. That's our house rule. You don't ever touch someone's body without permission, right? So that would be my answer to Kathy.
Thank you. I hope that helps, Kathy. All right, we'll get a couple more in here. Let's see. Okay. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and getting them to sleep on their own is such a challenge. And the 5-year-old is more anxious child and wants to climb into our bed every night. And they both want myself and my husband to sit in their rooms while they fall asleep at bedtime as well. How do we break this cycle?
Okay. So I think that rather than spend a long time on this, I should tell you where to find the answer, Jody. And what I'll say is, if you go to my website, parenting.com, and you go to the toddler section of the website and put in the word sleep, or just, it's 1,000 pages, right? So you do have to have the right term or know what you're looking for. But the toddler section is very robust. You put in the word sleep and toddler, or you just go to the toddler section and you look for how to get your child to sleep in their own bed. And you read that article, basically what it will say, and it will apply to your 5-year-old as well, I guarantee you. Then you basically go through this prescribed practice where you're gradually weaning your child away from your presence. And if your children don't sleep in the same room, you'll have to do one at a time. And your husband can do one while you do one, or you can do, your husband can lie with the 2-year-old and fall asleep while you work on the 5-year-old and train the 5-year-old. This is sleep training, but it's not leaving your child alone to cry, ever. It's helping your child face their fears. So you say the 5-year-old's anxious. What you're going to do is help the 5-year-old to learn that it's not dangerous to go to sleep. That's what you're really trying to do. So basically you want to go through this protocol, is what I guess I would call it, where one step at a time, you're showing your child that it's not a dangerous thing to go to sleep in their bed. And your child might cry, but you're there the whole time. They're learning that they can show you those fears, they can encounter those fears, they can surface those fears. That's what happens. They can get to all of those deep fears that are keeping them from falling asleep, and they can get through them. And it's okay, you're there. And you're not, you'll see that in the beginning, you're right next to them and you're saying to them, I'm going to be leaving soon. And your child begins to cry and you say, I know it's hard, but you can handle this. And you don't leave. Let them surface all those fears and you comfort them. And then when they stop crying, you say, and I'm going to step back to here, and you just keep moving your way out of the room. But you'll see it's all in the article. And I think that will really help you. Good luck.
Thank you. So there was just one more question that I was going to ask here, and then we'll sign off for here since we said a half an hour. What do you do about kids that are picky eaters? Like, how can you peacefully try to help them eat new foods?
Great. So toddlers are famous for becoming picky. Right? They might have tried everything when they were babies, but then later they get picky. The good news is that there's a window of time between about 8 months and 11 months. I'm pretty sure I've got those months right. It might be a little bit more or less in either direction. Anyway, during that time, when you give a child anything, you're stretching their taste buds. Once they're familiar with it, once you've given, and there are videos of giving babies something like broccoli rabe or kale that's a little on the bitter side, and the baby will go, and the baby spits out the stuff, right? But then you hold out the spoon with more kale, ground kale, right? And you ground up, and the baby goes, and spits it out again, right? But they keep taking it when you hold out the spoon, right? So the baby's just learning about that. And the great news is that if you did that when your child was younger, they're going to have more expansive taste buds later. Now, that doesn't mean they won't love kale when they're 13. I didn't know to do this. I hadn't yet read that study. My daughter loves kale now, and she hated it when she was young. So you can certainly, they can learn to love something later that you didn't do that with. But if you have a young child, and people with toddlers often have a baby as well, then hopefully you'll try that. So what about when they get to toddlerhood? Why do they stop eating the kale and everything else? Because they're worried about dying. And I know they're not consciously worried, but actually our genetics are from the Stone Age. Think about a toddler back in the Stone Age who was like, yeah, let me try that. Let me try this one. Let me try this one. That toddler didn't make it to adulthood. They ate things they shouldn't have, right? Poison berries, whatever. So the toddlers who were the picky eaters, they're the ones who survived, and they passed their genes down to us. So every toddler comes by it honestly that they become a picky eater at that point, and they're like, no, I'm not trying this. So how do we get kids to like things that we want them to try? You have to eat the thing in front of the toddler and also offer to the toddler at least 10 times. You have to eat that kale and not say, oh, this is so good for you. No, that's not going to make anybody try anything. You have to say, oh, I love this kale. This is so delicious. Oh, I would do anything to get more kale, right? You have to impart to your toddler that this is the best thing ever. Now, your toddler might not agree with you when they do try the kale, but they're more likely to keep an open mind about it. They're more likely to say, don't like it, but at least they tried it if they saw you enjoy it 10 times. And after all, you're still alive, so you didn't die from the kale. It wasn't a poison berry, so they can trust you, right? So it's really all about modeling and offering. So, there's a wonderful book, French Kids Eat Everything, I think it's called. And it basically talks about how you do this, that when parents love vegetables and they prepare them well and they eat lots of vegetables, their kids end up loving vegetables and eating them and trying them. We're the role models. So I guess I would just say, don't give up. Keep your kids, be the role model and keep offering your kids all the different foods, and sooner or later they will try them.
Thank you. There are lots of questions. If you guys have more questions, you can definitely head over to AHA Parenting. Like you said, there's a lot of resources on there that they could use, right?
Yes, 1,000 pages.
Awesome. Also, before you go, everybody, can you guys give some love to Dr. Laura here in the chat, thanking her for coming on with us today, and just all the resources that she has for us is just amazing. And then before you go, can you tell us about your free gift?
Sure. I think it's a meditation. I'm sorry,
yeah.
but I appear on lots of things and they ask me for free gifts, and so I'm not even positive, but I believe it's a meditation.
Yep.
And I think it's the grounding meditation. Yes. Okay, great. So meditation has been shown to rewire your brain so you can stay more calm with your child. However, meditation is super hard. So when you're trying to get started meditating, it helps to have a short guided meditation. And I love the grounding meditation for beginning meditators, or even for experienced meditators who are feeling a little overwhelmed by life or by parenting a toddler, because the grounding meditation helps you get centered so you can handle big emotions. It basically allows you, it's sort of like brushing your teeth, but for your mind, right? It allows you to just drain off all the dreck from yesterday and start over today with an open heart and a fresh set of energy. So that it's very short, it's 7 minutes. And I know even 7 minutes is a lot for a mom or a dad who's got a toddler, but it's short enough and you get such good results that I think you'll find that it's helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. And I have the link and I will post it later today with the replay as well so that everybody has access to that. And then again, you can go to AHA Parenting so that you can check out more resources. And one of our prizes is a signed copy of Happy Kids. peaceful parent, happy kids. So that's really exciting too. So thank you so much. It has truly been an honor. I really appreciate you coming on the summit. Thank you so much.